Governor Roy Cooper is proposing to spend $25 billion in his new state operating budget plan for the year that begins July 1st. And despite the governor's frequent complaints about tax cuts that have been enacted by Republicans since 2011, his operating budget plan doesn't try to undo those tax cuts. It's just a couple of the things happening in this document that would set the course for North Carolina. Locke Foundation Senior Fellow Joe Coletti is studying the governor's plan. He joins us now to talk about some of the details. Joe, welcome back.
Glad to have a break from looking at the numbers.
Yes, walk into your office and your head is down looking at all the documents. Give us your overall reaction to what the governor has proposed.
First, it's not much different from his previous proposals in that there's no chance that the Republican legislature is going to approve something that's close to what he's doing in the major areas. You mentioned $25 billion. That's 5.5% increase in spending over last year, which is well above what we've been looking at in terms of keeping spending constant per person, adjusting for inflation, and which is somewhere around 3.5% this year, and it's even further above what the legislature and what the state has been spending has been increasing spending on since 2011. It's been growing at about 2.5%, and this more than doubles that increase. So that's a significant thing. And the other part of it is that, as you mentioned, despite all the complaints, the governor does not increase taxes, which is a little bit of a difference from the last 2 years. So that is a sign that the economy is doing really well, that they had some money left over the past 2 years, and part of that has been revenues coming in above expectations. You can't really count on that in the future, but that has left him with $1 billion cushion to start this year, that he's put half of that into reserves and has put half of that into one-time spending within the budget.
Let's talk about how he plans to use all of that funding. First of all, Medicaid expansion is in the plan. No big surprise there. Right. The governor is a staunch supporter of the idea of expanding Medicaid through the Affordable Care Act. So tell us what is in the budget. What will that cost? How will he do this?
Well, according to the governor in the budget document, this costs the state $0.
How's that possible?
Because they will add new taxes onto providers. And
that would be like hospitals, doctors.
And others. Yeah. The budget staff always refers to just hospitals, and so I don't know if that would be other providers as well. But specifically, hospitals have been mentioned. And then there's as Medicaid transitions from fee-for-service to managed care, the managed care organizations that are going to be those in between. The in-between step between the state and the individual on Medicaid, they're going to start paying an equivalent of a premiums tax, and some of that premium tax, if the state expands Medicaid, would then go back in to pay the state share of Medicaid. So
let's explain for a minute too about when we say Medicaid expansion. First of all, the Medicaid program is a federal and state program designed to provide health coverage for vulnerable populations, widows, low-income folks, disabled children.
Yeah.
And the governor's expansion plan would add about 500,000 people.
500,000 people to 2 million people currently on it. The largest portion of recipients right now are children, low-income children. The most expensive populations on it are people in long-term care, either the elderly or those with disabilities. And so that's who currently it's a 2-to-1 match for the state, federal dollars to state dollars. The new population, which will be mostly able-bodied adults. The governor keeps talking about working adults, but you don't have to be working to be able to qualify. And so those new able-bodied adults will be covered at a 90% federal rate, 10% state, meaning hospitals, new taxes. And so on that side, if they're free, then that's a different set of things compared to the population that we've been trying to cover, and will likely mean that there's going to be more emphasis placed on them because, well, they're free. Anything that we do there doesn't cost the state any money, and so that's part of the concern, and just the shell game that's going on there. That governors claimed often that that there are no new taxes and he's not raising taxes, except for in this one place where it's a significant tax increase of 10% of $2 billion the first year, $200 million. 10% of $400 million, $4 billion the second year, $400 million. So that's a lot of money that we're asking the hospitals and these new insurance providers to step in.
We know there's going to be a big debate going forward over that for sure. Now, something that's getting a lot of attention in the governor's proposed budget plan, Joe, is a very big bond that he is proposing. Tell us how much and what for.
So the governor is looking for $3.9 billion in borrowing, which, if you remember, in 2016, not that long ago, we passed, North Carolinians approved a $2 billion Connect NC bond. The governor is looking for $3.9 billion, what he's calling an Invest NC bond. And that would be $2 billion for public schools, $1 billion for universities and community colleges, and then another, and the remainder of that would be for local water sewer projects and for the State Zoo and the History Museum. But that's twice as much, more than twice as much, than what either the House in its bond proposal or the Senate in its pay-as-you-go plan are looking to spend. They've talked about $2 billion total, and the governor's looking at nearly $4 billion in borrowing.
Now, Joe, as you ticked off the different areas or entities that would receive that funding, should this actually make it to the ballot and voters approve that $3.9 billion bond, community colleges and universities, didn't they just get a bunch of funding in the last bond?
They were a significant part of the Connect NC bond, which is one of the things that has a number of us scratching our heads.
Interesting. So that would be a case where voters would have to approve that. It would be on the ballot. Right. Voters have to vote yes or no. But you point out that in the governor's proposal for the budget, that there's also some debt that we could be incurring without a vote of the people. Yeah,
there's $288 million of what they call limited obligation bonds. There's all kinds of terms that the state has used for debt that's not been approved by the voters. And the largest portion of this is going to be to move the Department of Health and Human Services to Blue Ridge Road in Raleigh. And right now, the motor fleet is there, the state textbook warehouse is there, a few other buildings. It's across the street from the Museum of Art. But that's a place that during the McCrory administration they were looking at and saying, this is valuable property. We should sell it. And instead we're going to use $250 million or so of this non-voter approved debt to move DHHS, the Department of Health and Human Services, there and relocate the other state agencies.
Joe, there are so many components of this, and I know you are working on a report that will be available at johnlocke.org detailing all of these different components, but I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about the education piece. The governor has made a lot of the fact that he wants to spend a lot more money on the K-12 system and on teachers, and he actually wants to close the door on a private voucher system known as the Opportunity Scholarship, that for low-income families.
Yeah, and the closing the scholarship opportunities for the future students really makes no sense. They say that it's because the scholarships have been used less than anticipated, but it's a new program. It takes some time, and you are really taking it away from the people who have the greatest need and whose schools have been failing them. So you're really making educational opportunity dependent on zip code and income if you take away these scholarships, which the governor is proposing to do.